Yes, guys, what's happening? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to this evening's live stream where we'll be looking ahead to Chelsea versus Lille in the Champions League round of 16 first leg. The European and world champions will be returning to Champions League action against the champions of France. And I'm delighted to be joined by freelance journalist Nischal to discuss the game, pick a lineup and talk about probably some attacking issues and all other things related to Chelsea and this game. Mate, thank you so much for joining me. You'd be forgiven for believing that Chelsea are having a dreadful season with what you see on Twitter, with what you see reported in the media. But I think it's important to have a little bit of perspective. I've obviously been critical of performances in recent months myself, but the fact of the matter is we have only lost 4 games this season where we've won 2 trophies. We're in a League Cup final this weekend, and we're still in every cup competition available to us. So it's not all doom and gloom. But before we get into kind of Champions League itself, by all means, we've not been playing well for a good while now. I'd say probably at least 2 to 3 months. We're scraping buying games. Another perfect example. You were there, Crystal Palace on Saturday afternoon. We were quite awful, but we managed to pick out one moment of class and we nicked the win. We've been nicking wins for a long time. What do you put that down to? Because this is a consistent problem at the moment.
Yeah, well, firstly, thanks for having me back on, Charlie. Good to be back on the channel. Yeah, you're right. I mean, many Chelsea fans can agree. I don't think we've played well personally since that 4-0 against Juventus. Since then, we've been inconsistent. We've had maybe one good game every month or so, beating Spurs. We played well, a good performance here and there. Liverpool's a good example, but consistently, we've not played that well. But on the other hand, something that I admire about us is that we don't have to play well to win, which not every team can say. We can have a lot of awful games, yet still scrape by and win, and that's what good teams can do. They don't have to play beautiful, attacking, sexy football every game. As long as they get a win and 3 points, that's what matters. But I think it's down to a combination of issues. You look at defining moments that have happened on and off the pitch with Chilwell and James being ruled out injured, Lukaku having his whole interview debacle, Mendy going away to AFCON vote. That's been said, Kepa did really well. But you also have to look at things like form and mentality. We went through our normal December dip, but we haven't really emerged from it. We had our rest, but then we did a 7,000, 10,000 mile round trip off to Abu Dhabi where we got another trophy. So there are a lot of extenuating factors which will naturally affect the season and make it difficult for us. But at the end of the day, we can't be making excuses or trying to point here and there about why it's been difficult. Yes, we've had a lot of issues to deal with from COVID, from injuries, from sagas and whatnot. But at the end of the day, we've not been good enough for a long time. And it is worrying. And it is good to see that we can still get results from it. But on the other hand, you compare us to the likes of Liverpool and City, they're at least playing well and playing good football. And it showed when we went up against Liverpool, when they went 2-0 up. It shows when we went up against City and they've beaten us twice this season. There is a gulf in quality, which we've seen throughout the season in specific moments and in crucial defining moments of the season. So, yes, we shouldn't be all doom and gloom about the season. We've already picked up 2 trophies, which is a fantastic achievement. We're en route for a 3rd, hopefully, this weekend. But there is a lot to look at and a lot to reflect on because it's not like we're playing brilliant football week in, week out. We're smashing games. We're winning comfortably. There are issues to look at and there's a lot to analyse and a lot to understand as to why we've not been at our top level for months.
I personally put it down to obviously as you say, we're scraping through games. I think that's why at the moment we're such a good cup team because you don't need to play consistently well over a long period of time to win a cup competition. You've got to string together at most maybe 4 or 5 wins to get to win a trophy. In 4 or 5 games, you can kind of put them together, particularly if you get drawn against not so good opposition, etc., etc. But over a period of 38 games in the league, ultimately, I think this is why we're coming up so short. It's because you can't scrape by every week because you will get found out. And I think that's the big difference is where we're falling down in the league compared to the cups. But I mean, you can't complain too much. Yes, we want to win the Premier League. Yes, we're a long way from that at the moment. It hurts to admit that. I honestly really thought this season that we'd go pretty close with the signings we made in the summer. Obviously, Chilwell and James being out injured has slightly hampered us. But even with them in, I still feel we'd be closer, but we're still going to I still think we're going to fall a bit short. I just think we can't outplay teams the way that City and Liverpool do in terms of scoring a lot of goals. We were always going to be built from being defensively solid at the back and nicking the odd 1 or 2 goals in forward areas. But yeah, there's definitely room for improvement. I want to move on to the attack. I don't want to spend too long on it because it seems like all Chelsea fans ever do is talk about Romelu Lukaku. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on him. We obviously spoke before the Tottenham game in the league. Things haven't really improved that much since then. The Club World Cup, give him fair dues there. The performances weren't great from the team as a whole in both of those games, but he popped up with 2 really important goals, and he played a big part in us winning that trophy for the first time in the club's history. So credit where it's due there. But obviously, we saw probably one of his worst performances in a Chelsea shirt on Saturday at Selhurst Park. I think he had 7 touches in total, 2 in the first half, one of those being from the kickoff. Now, you can look at this 2 ways, and for me, it is twofold. One, he's not making the effort to get involved more in the game, in terms of work rate, in terms of making runs, in terms of showing for the ball, etc. But on the other hand, and I'm sure you might have seen the match of the day analysis, it's been floating around on Twitter as well, there are several moments where players aren't playing him in, or they're not looking to play him in. We've got, I think, a big problem with the attack is we are so slow in the transition from midfield to attack. We're so slow in players making decisions on the ball. I mean, I don't want to knock Kai Havertz too much. He's another one that needs to step up big time, but particularly on Saturday, so slow making decisions, holding onto the ball for too long. We've got players that take no risk in those attacking areas. The only player at the moment who's taking risks is Hakim Ziyech, and it's actually paying off for him at the moment. No one takes players on. No one plays a ball over the top. No one tries anything risky. It's always hold on to the ball for too long. The moment's gone. It's play sideways. It's play backwards. And that's not helping him. But I mean, I wanted to get your thoughts. It's been a couple of months since we last touched base. And I mean, where do you stand now on the Lukaku situation? I remember you saying that you were at Brighton away, and when he got subbed off, the reception was poor, etc. But if we're being perfectly honest, he's an easy target, and this problem is much deeper than just him.
Yeah, absolutely. And since we last spoke a month ago, nothing's changed. I still hold the same opinion. I still see the same issues. And like you said, credit to him. He did well at the Club World Cup. He got 2 goals. He was on the score sheet, and he helped us win the tournament. Fair play to him. And I appreciate that. But when I saw the stat from Palace and when I saw the performance, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't like, oh, I've never seen this Lukaku before. He never plays like this. He's always like that. He's been like that for a while. And I think what annoys me is the argument that he doesn't get service, because fine, maybe he doesn't get the ball as much as he wants to, but you're not going to get service if you don't do anything.
Yeah.
It's like expecting to be paid when you don't work. It's the same concept. If you're not going to work and put the hours in and make an effort, what can you expect? Why do you think you're entitled to do that? And you see him play, and most fans I know have either lost faith in him, are done with him, or are still struggling to get back on terms. And I can't blame anyone. And I do understand, yes, he's an easy target. Yes, some of the criticism and some of the backlash has been a bit unnecessary and has overstepped the line. But I completely sympathise and empathise how everyone feels, because I'm just as frustrated. And I don't want to see him start right now. He shouldn't be starting. It's as easy as that. And he's the only player in Tuchel's system who seems to be persistently played and persistently give a chance. You see the likes of, Kepa in goal, or other forwards like Pulisic, Hudson Odoi, Werner. When they've not been in form, they've not been playing and they've been dropped. So why isn't it the same with Lukaku? Maybe Tuchel sees something different in him. And I think we haven't seen that by the fact that he was brought into the team so quickly after the whole interview saga. But everyone can see that he doesn't help our attack. There was another really interesting stat comparing Chelsea with Lukaku and Chelsea without Lukaku. And without Lukaku, we had more goals scored, more chances created, and a higher expected goals tally. And it's not a coincidence. It's not something that's just these random stats that come together that are being manipulated. So I genuinely think we played better without him. And at the start of the season, we played really well with him because he contributed to our system. He was doing well. He was scoring goals. Since then, since about probably Boxing Day, i.e. before the whole saga, he's not been playing well and he shouldn't be starting. It's really frustrating because it's the conversation that's dominating everything about Chelsea when it shouldn't be. Something we thrive on is not being a one-man team anymore, in my opinion. And the whole issues arising from Lukaku it's just bringing us back to that and bringing us back to the same issues. So my opinions are the same, my feelings are the same. It's just a case of, does time heal it? Will his performances heal it? Are we going to get a winner between Tuchel and Lukaku? It's hard to say. It's already been 2 months since the interview, and we're still feeling the effects of it. Like, it was never going to go away. As much as the board wanted that, as much as the management wanted that, it wasn't going to be, okay, slap on the wrist, I'll go play and score some goals. That was never going to happen. This stuff doesn't happen in football or at Chelsea. So we're dealing with the consequences of Lukaku's actions, and it's still going on, and it's still affecting everyone at the club.
I've been thinking about this over the last day or so, and I'd be interested to get your thoughts. I'm quite surprised slightly that we spent a lot of money on Lukaku. It was the club wanted him. By all means, Tuchel approved the signing. It's what we were missing from last season. Someone to put the ball in the net. Our deficiencies, despite our success in the Champions League, were obvious. We didn't have a goal scorer. So you think, right, okay, couldn't Haaland too much money. Kane wasn't going to come to Chelsea. Lukaku was the best on the market that was attainable for us to get. I don't think anyone had any problems with bringing him back. But what baffles me is Chelsea knew exactly what they were getting when they paid that money for Lukaku. He's a counter-attacking striker in a counter-attacking system, but we've signed him and we play a possession-based football. That doesn't particularly seem to suit him. Now, I understand that, you shouldn't just change your whole system and your whole coaching foundations or coaching beliefs based on one player. But then on the flip side, if you're spending this much money on someone, you want to do everything possible to get the best out of him so that he scores the goals that makes your team successful. So whilst he must do more, 100% must do more, must look like he wants to be there, must make more runs, must work harder on the pitch, part of me feels that, are Chelsea actually doing the most they can to get the best out of him? Because for me, if you spend that much money on a player, you should be building the team around him and doing everything you can to make him comfortable and to make him play his best, which ultimately is going to benefit the team. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
To an extent, yes. And I completely get the argument about the type of profile player we've signed versus the type of system we play. But like you said, I don't think we should be a club where we can adapt to one player and change our whole system to play. And I think it's really on Lukaku to be able to adapt to our system as well. Yes, maybe he doesn't like it. Maybe he doesn't fit it. And we get that. But we've seen so many players have had to readapt to the system into new positions. You look at Hudson Odoi and Pulisic having to play wing backs. We've seen Mason Mount drop into midfield. We've seen Azpilicueta have to play further up at wing back, which he's not always used to. And I think it's a case of most players just get on with it. Lukaku came out and was complaining, and I get the frustration. You would naturally understand why a world-class striker would be frustrated that you're not playing to his strengths, you're not helping him as much. But on the other hand, if you're paying £100 million for a striker and a world-class player, you should be able to expect them to make an effort at least to adapt to the system and integrate themselves into Chelsea rather than the other way around. Because that's not how football works. If it was a Messi type player, sure, you would change your system a bit for him because it's Messi. But it's not the same for Lukaku. And I think that's what's frustrating, is that he almost we had an expectation that we were going to have to adapt and change. But Chelsea don't want to adapt their system. Lukaku doesn't want to adapt his system. And it's almost a clash of opinions, which I see has come out. So I get the arguments and I understand where everyone's coming from. But at the end of the day, I don't think we should be buckling to one player and adapting for them.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I think ultimately, for me at the moment, obviously I'm not saying things can't change, but ultimately this only ends right now for me in one situation where if we're not going to change the system to accommodate Lukaku, then this is not going to work how we're playing at the moment, how we're planning to carry on. So ultimately, if this doesn't change, for me, we're going to have to sell in the summer and take a loss, because if Tuchel is going to stick to his guns and that's the system, that's the type of football he wants to play, Lukaku doesn't fit that system or that style of playing, which then makes the signing all the more baffling in the first place when you sort of zero down on it. But enough on Lukaku, because we could spend all day talking about him. Attacking in general, though, it's not just him, which is really important to say. I think it's important that people prepared to criticise Lukaku, and rightly so, that the same energy is brought to the other attacking players, which have also been brought in for big money, who also aren't delivering. Why do you think we've got so fewer players in the attack, despite all the talent we've got, that are so risk averse? Why does no one take any risks? I mean, obviously, Hakim Ziyech in recent weeks has been our best player, fantastic, takes risks and is doing really well. Why have we got no one that, as I said earlier, kind of takes a risk, tries a risky ball over the top, tries a through ball that might not come off, try and take someone on? We've got no one that does that.
I think it's a mix of mentality in certain players, a mix of not having players like that who will take a risk, who will take players on. And you have to think about individual, background for each player. You think of Hudson Odoi, he's come back from his Achilles injury. And I think every fan can agree that he's been a bit more reluctant since then due to that injury. Pulisic as well, coming back from COVID, Havertz as well. But it doesn't necessarily justify that all of our attackers seem almost scared to take on defences, scared to create something, scared to try something. And, sometimes I'm not sure, but I do feel like it's something to do with mentality. It's the same way where we don't know our best attack. We don't have a consistent front three. We haven't seen the Champions League front three from the final, Mount, Havertz, Werner, in a long, long time. Arguably, I don't think we've seen it since the final, which is quite worrying. And that sort of issue of not having consistency. Only now we're seeing it with Ziyech getting a good run of games and playing well and getting goals and getting assists. That's what we've needed for the rest of attack. But none of them have had a good run in a team, with the exception of Lukaku, who hasn't played well, and Hudson Odoi, who kind of fizzled out and went down after he ran out. So it's a mix of things, and it also comes down to the attacking players we have. We don't really have goal-scoring wingers. We don't have brave attackers. We don't have the Hazards, the Zolas, the Robins, even if you want to go back to that era. And I think that's what costs us, and that's what really holds us back. And, it's the same issue when you see people saying, let's sign Ousmane Dembele. And that's like, well, that's not going to fix the problem. That's just going to add to it. If you want to sign a new attacker, sign someone who fixes our problems and actually ticks the boxes rather than they're a good player overall. Because what does that mean? That might mean on paper they're good or they've done well in the Eredivisie or La Liga or Bundesliga, but do they fit what we need? Are they a goal-scoring out-and-out winger who is good, has good fitness, is entering the prime of their career, will start week in, week out, and actually fits our system? There's so many boxes to tick, and I think if we look at our attacking signings over the last 3-4 years, only really Havertz sort of fits, and even then he's not been at his best for a while, and he's still faltered here and there despite his heroics. And then of course Mason Mount has come up from the academy. He's one of the only ones who tick that box. But when you look at other players we've signed, how many of those boxes do they tick? How many of those requirements do they actually fulfill in what we need in an attack? And that's what we need to reevaluate in terms of getting rid of the attackers that don't contribute, that aren't consistent enough, that don't do enough for us right now, and bringing in players who will actually change that and improve that.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Just last thing on this, I think the summer is going to be big in terms of recruitment, particularly in those attacking positions. There's going to be one or two players that are definitely going to be probably moved on. I'm thinking of the likes of your Timo Werner's, probably Christian Pulisic as well. And I think as a club, we've got to be ruthless, and no club likes to make a loss on an investment they've made. But to get these players out, we're going to have to be prepared that we're going to take a hit. No way are we getting 50 million for Timo Werner this summer. Not a chance. Are we going to get this near the 60-odd million we paid for Pulisic? No. But we've got to be ruthless. We've got to move these players out that aren't performing on a consistent basis and aren't doing it enough for Chelsea Football Club. And I think we need to relook at what we want from an attacking player profile. Like, what are we looking for? Are we looking for a tricky player? Are we looking for someone that is a wide forward that scores loads of goals? Because at the moment, we've got a mismatch of all sorts that aren't delivering anything whatsoever. And like you, I do like Kai Havertz. I think he's good. But at the moment, we're in a situation where no one knows what his position is. He sometimes plays 10, sometimes plays as a second striker, sometimes plays wide. And, we're just trying to shoehorn him into the team. And I think it's a problem when you spend this much money on a player. And I'm starting to think, did we actually think about where he fits in, how we're going to use him to benefit this team? Or did we just sign him because we wanted to stop everyone else from signing him? Because right now, if you ask me what's Kai Havertz's best position, I've got no idea. I don't know. I don't think Thomas Tuchel knows either. But ultimately, we have got him, and hopefully we can make it work. But I think that's just the case of, particularly in these attacking positions, we're just amassing a mixture of players that none of them really suit what we're trying to do, which has got to change going forward. But moving on to the Champions League, obviously we're the holders, which is fantastic. Never gets old saying that. What are your expectations from the Champions League this season? Because obviously last season we didn't expect to win. Do you think we can still go quite far in this competition despite our indifferent form in the league?
Yeah, of course, and it's the same point that you said earlier, where we're better in cups because it's a one-off and you don't have to play well throughout the tournament. You know, everyone enjoys slamming Chelsea, saying we were worst Champions League winners and all, but we did play well in those individual games. Even if around those games we were losing, 5-2 to West Brom, for example, 1-0 to Arsenal. When it came to those Champions League nights against the big teams under the lights, we were performing and we were winning. And it can be the same this season, but it depends whether we turn up on the day. And that's what we did last time. That's what we did last season. It's how we got to win in the Champions League. But it depends, how do we play? And I think Lille gives us a really good opportunity, because if you look at the draw, it was the perfect team for us to play. With all due respect to Lille, it gave us the best chance of progression, and that's what we want to aim for. And it's definitely a case of going out, showing what we're made of, showing why we're the champions of Europe and why we won it last year. Of course, I don't doubt us winning it again this season, but it depends on so much. It depends what form we're in, how we're doing, who we play. But I'd absolutely back us to win it again. I'd want at least, at the very least, quarterfinals, ideally semis, or best of all, win it again.
Yeah, no, I think we can definitely go far, but as you say, it does depend on a number of factors. The draw is obviously going to be part of it. I thought last season we got quite fortunate with some of the draws, but you still got to beat everyone in front of you. So, and we did that, conceded the least goals in Champions League history. So we're obviously doing something right. Obviously, it's going to Lille themselves. I don't know how much you watch them, how much you know about them, but obviously defending French champions, things aren't going so well for them this season. They're struggling down in mid-table. Thomas Tuchel obviously will know the side quite well from his time managing in France, PSG. Lille have got some quite good players though. It's like we've got to be aware. Jonathan David, the Canadian forward, is someone who is an exciting player. I think he can be dangerous. Renato Sanchez, who was meant to be some sort of boy wonder, went to Bayern Munich, wasn't great, had that awful loan spell at Swansea. But he's kind of starting to rebuild himself again at Lille. And obviously Hatem Ben Arfa as well. I think he's about 34, 35 now, but he's back in their ranks. So they've got a few players that could cause us some issues. And this is perhaps not going to be as easy as many people might think.
Honestly, I can't pretend to be an expert on Lille, but from what I do know from them, they're defending French champions for a reason. They've reached the stage for a reason. And they also got out of a really competitive and open group, featuring the likes of Wolfsburg, Sevilla, and I've forgotten the fourth team actually. Wolfsburg, Sevilla, Lille, and
I can't remember the last one, but
it will come to me at some point. But I do remember it was a very open group. Anyone could have gone through. Lots of options and lots of strong teams in that group, and they've got out of it for a reason. They won the league for a reason, and maybe they're not in the best form in the league, but it's the same way that if we can perform on a one-off day, so can they. We've seen that so many times in the cups, for example, this season against the likes of Plymouth Argyle, against the likes of Al Hilal, played pretty well in the Club World Cup semi-finals. So we can't underestimate them. It's not a write-off, and we almost did that last season when we played Porto, for example. And then they pulled it back, and they weren't as poor as people made it out to be. So, we shouldn't be underestimating Lille. They're still a strong team. We still have to respect them. But on the other hand, we should be winning, and we should be going through. And I think we will. And I hope we will. But, Tuesday's game will be interesting, seeing as, we've got that confidence from the Club World Cup, and we thought we'd come back raring to go. But then you saw Tuchel saying the players were jet lagged, getting used to the change of weather, change of environment. And you could see that on the pitch, and we're not in good form. So we'll have to see how we do. And, of course, we're picking up the competition for the first time in 2 months. So a lot has changed since then. So it'll be a really interesting battle and one I'm looking forward to.
Thanks to Texas Blue 24. Salzburg was the other team in that group. It certainly is going to be interesting. In terms of, I just wanted to get your thoughts on of something that's been removed from the competition. I'm just going to bring it on the screen now. Obviously, the away goals has disappeared, and obviously Tuchel in his press conference today was saying that him and most coaches were in favour of getting rid of that away goals rule. What's your thoughts on it, mate? Do you miss the away goals rule? Do you think it's something that needed to go? How do you see it?
I enjoyed it to an extent. I think it added a really nice element to the Champions League. It made it more exciting and more risky and taking those chances for away teams to get goals. But the way I see it is, I think the stronger a team is, the more beneficial the removal of away goals is, because it benefits the team away from home and arguably the smaller ones. You look at cases where we've come up against a weaker team, they've had a one away goal and it completely changes the dynamic of a tie. Whereas now, let's say we win 3-1, 3-1 lead is comfortable and it's a good result. If that was last season, the other team have an away goal, they only have to win 2-0 to go through. So I think for stronger teams, it's a big advantage. Hence why Tuchel is saying that, and hence why most managers will be in agreement of it. From a neutral perspective, obviously, the away goal was fun. It added more for the away teams. It meant they couldn't be defensive away from home and they had to go from forward. But I think it will take us a bit longer to really see whether we should or should not have the away goals. Everyone was moaning about it and demanding it returned after literally one night of Champions League knockout football. And I'm thinking, well, give it time. Same thing with VAR. People hated it or loved it at first, but you need to give it time to develop, see how it unravels, see how it does. Maybe they bring it back in the future and realize it was a mistake. Maybe they think, actually, this is the right move. We did this for a reason and it's happened for a reason. But absolutely for us and against a team like Lille, it's an advantage. No doubt about that.
Yeah, no, I agree, mate. I think I'm an advocate. I can understand why it was brought in the first place. It was to encourage teams playing away from home, obviously, not to sit back and just play for a 0-0, to give them a bit more of an incentive to come out. But I can also get the argument on the flip side, and this is kind of what I subscribe into a bit more, is that why should a goal scored somewhere else be worth 2 goals? Like Tuchel was saying today, why should 3-1 be less of a good result than 2-0? Because he's still winning by the same amount of goals. And I think as a team, as a manager, you'd be pretty pissed if you drew a tie 2-2, but you went out because someone else's goal counted for 2 because scored. Look at it from that point of view, it seems pretty ridiculous to even have the away goals in. But obviously, it's been taken away now. And as you said, you need to give it at least 2 or 3 editions of the Champions League to get a wider perspective and a bigger pool of data to see ultimately whether that was the right decision. But I do think the next thing also needs to be extra time needs to be scrapped as well, in my opinion, in terms of if you've watched 90 minutes of a game and you haven't found the winner, you don't want to watch another half hour. I know some games are quite exciting and you might want to, but in terms of fixture congestion, player welfare, etc., do we need extra time? I mean, obviously, it's a different conversation, but just very briefly, mate, do you feel that extra time is something that should stay, or do you think ultimately, like we see in the League Cup, it should perhaps fall by the wayside?
I would disagree with that, actually, because I think it depends on a competition. If we're looking at fixed congestion in England, removing replays, for example, that makes a big difference because it's another day of travel. It's another potential 2 hours of football. And, League Cup, same thing, going from 90 minutes straight to penalties. I think that makes sense. I think it's understandable. But the beauty of extra time is, sometimes it can be where teams are so hard to separate. You go the distance and you go to penalties. Sometimes it could be a 3-3 draw and it gives an extra half an hour momentum, extra football, even think from a fan's perspective, like extra value for money if you get extra time and penalties. I'm still in favour of it. I get the argument about player welfare, fixed congestion, but the way I see it is I think there are other ways of changing the game to address fixed congestion and player welfare. For example, not having tournaments 10,000 miles away and going here and there for different tournaments and different games, not having games within 2 days of each other. I think there are other more effective ways to be able to address that. But extra time is an important part of football. It's almost, and I'm not criticising you, I'm saying this as a general point, but imagine if we said the same, let's not have penalties, it's unfair, it's a lottery, it's unbiased, but it's like, well, that's what makes football special. Having penalties, having these extra time moments, having these games. It could even get to be like, let's only have 45 minutes. If it's goalless, then we just call it a draw, I think there are other ways to address stuff like fixed congestion and stuff like that. And that mainly goes to money grabbing techniques like moving tournaments across the world, doing, Spain, a really bad example of doing the Copa del Rey and the Supercopa de España, the equivalent of the Community Shield and the FA Cup in Saudi Arabia. Why would you want to see that? What's the point of that? So there are other ways to address it, in my opinion. Yeah, no,
100%, mate. Obviously, into the team news now. It's a big week for Chelsea. You've got Champions League action and the Cup final at the end of the week. Cesar Azpilicueta is back in team training. He should be fine to play. Mason Mount also back in team training, but this Lille game is probably going to, he's definitely not starting. Tuchel said he could possibly make the bench, but it depends obviously how he comes through this session this evening. Callum Hudson-Odoi wasn't in training tonight, and obviously Reece James and Ben Chilwell are still out. So pretty much same squad to pick from the weekend, plus Aspi. In terms of formations, mate, we saw the back four on Saturday at Selhurst Park. We saw the back three in the Club World Cup. What are you expecting tomorrow? I mean, I'll bring it up on the screen now. I've got it as a back four, but do you think he could be tempted to go back to a back five? I mean, and also, what did you think of the fact that we went with 4 centre-backs in a back four on Saturday?
Well, first of all, that confused me because I was trying to figure out, I was like, surely we haven't got Christensen and Sarr as our fullbacks. But as the game went on, I was like, we do. And I thought it was pretty stupid, to be honest, because Sarr's an okay makeshift left back, but I don't think he's a starting left back. And Christensen was completely out of position the whole game. And you could see that from Palace's limited attacks, that we weren't playing with proper fullbacks or proper wing backs. So what I don't understand is the reason we switched to a back four in the first place was because we didn't have enough wing backs. But now we have enough centre backs. We're still playing a back four, which doesn't really make sense. So, it depends on opposition, depends on each case. But I would go for a back three tomorrow. And I'll stick on a 3-4-3.
I'll quickly switch it up. Yeah. I found that odd. We had this, as you say, we had the centre backs to play three at the back on Saturday, and yet we didn't do it. But yeah, I probably, I mean, either way, I don't mind too much. I mean, do you have a preference in system wise? Do you think, I mean, there's pros and cons to both. I think the back four definitely gets more out of Hakim Ziyech. He's obviously a lot more comfortable playing as an out and out winger rather than kind of one of those narrow 10s as such. But then equally as well, the back three were more defensive cover, more defensive stability. But then again, that obviously stifles us slightly in attack because you're losing one attacking player to make way for an extra defender. So it's got pros and cons to both. I mean, are you a fan of both of them, or is there one you clearly prefer over the other?
I don't have a preference. I think we knew that we were going to switch to a back four eventually. And what's really good to see is that we're flexible with our different formations. We're flexible going between a back four, a back three, a 4-2-2, a 4-3-3. We're flexible in each system, and each one has its advantage. Honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of a 4-2-2, just because I feel like sometimes it's a bit disjointed in attack. You haven't got enough width. It's a bit disjointed. It doesn't really work out, but sometimes it does. And I think 4-3-3 can look good. 3-4-2-1 can look good. It depends, and you trust Tuchel going on each competition, each opposition, each tactics, and also availability. But if I'd have to choose one, it would still be the back three, because I do still think that works effectively.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, it's going to be a pretty obvious choice in goal. Edouard Mendy, not really much discussion to be had there. In terms of the makeup of that back three, then, would you fully expect it to be Christensen, Thiago Silva, and Rudiger? Do you think Malang Sarr's got a case for the back three? Could we see Trevor Chalobah, or is it these guys are probably our three best defenders at the moment? We're going to stick them in.
Yeah, I think that's the case. Really, you do have to keep one eye on the cup final on Sunday, but we have a big advantage. In fact, we're at home, and going to Wembley isn't a difference from traveling from Stamford Bridge. It's not like we have to factor in travel or anything like that. We can go for our strongest team both games, in my opinion. So I would agree with you. I'd go with Christensen, Rudy, Silva. Chalobah, I don't want to rush him back yet. I know he's in team training and he's making his way back, but I feel like Luton is a good game for him to start again. Same with Sarr. He could start, but the only one of that back three you'd want to rest is Silva. And I think he's capable of starting both games this week. Maybe it will be Rudy in the middle and Sarr out wide to keep Thiago fresh for a weekend, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, and I think Silva's shown that if he's fit, he wants to play, and he's shown that he can play 2 games in a week. And as you say, no travel. We're at home for this game. It's on a Tuesday. We don't play till Sunday afternoon. There's not really any reason why he shouldn't play. Azpilicueta is back in the mix now. Would you expect him to slot back in at right wing back, or do you think? I mean, obviously with Callum Hudson-Odoi out, that was the other option. We're not going to see Christian Pulisic there, in my opinion. So almost by default, Azpilicueta is probably going to play there if we go over this system.
Yeah, and same on the left-hand side, actually, with Alonso, because an argument I was going to make from the Palace discussion was that as soon as we switched from a back four to a back three and Alonso went on, he got the match-winning assist with a brilliant cross, by the way. So switch into a back three, bring Alonso in. I'm fine with that. That's good defence for me.
Yeah, no, I would agree. This is where it gets a little bit more interesting. Obviously, the midfield too. Kovacic didn't play on Saturday. Well, he did, but he didn't play. He played about 15 minutes at the end. I thought we massively missed him in midfield, and I think that game particularly showed why he's got to start for us, like as often as possible. Would you agree with that? He's definitely one that would slot in for you.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Kante and Kovacic in midfield. Jorginho has been a bit shaky recently. I think it was quite divided opinion looking at the weekend. I don't think Jorginho had the best game, to be honest with you. He lost possession quite a bit. He was quite out of position. He wasn't awful, but he didn't have a good game. And as soon as Kovacic came on, we looked better. We had drive in midfield. We were a bit more kind of together and compact. And like I said, we're going for the strongest team. Again, Silva and Conte are the two players we want to keep an eye on and we want to be careful. So maybe we see Jovetic and we see Jorginho in the team to keep Conte fresh, but I would stick with Kovacic and Conte to start with.
Yeah, I think this system suits Kante a lot better as well. I mean, against Palace, he started as a number 8, and as much as I love Kante as a player and he's class, I don't ever want to see him play number 8. He's not a number 8. Like, you got to link up with the wingers. You've got to be comfortable in forward positions. Yes, he's got better on the ball in forward areas, but you don't want N'Golo Kante on the end of big chances. Now, was that one in the first half where he found himself in the box with a shot? Yeah, he gets it on target, forces a save, but you don't want that falling to him on the pitch.
It was a poor finish.
It was poor. But, I mean, Kante, for me, I'd be interested to get your thoughts briefly. Like, I don't think he's as important to Chelsea now as he perhaps was in recent years in terms of, yes, he's a must in big games, but in other, I'd 100% play him in the League Cup final. But for example, Selhurst Park Saturday, I don't think that was a game that required Kante. Like, I think there's a lot more occasions now where we can just get by without him. Big occasions, 100%. Cup finals, big semi-finals, or big games in the Champions League or whatever. N'Golo Kante, 100%. But in your kind of week-to-week league matches, I don't think we need him every week.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's unpopular or not.
I would argue it's the same with every player in the case where, like I said, we're not a one-man team anymore and we can survive without certain players. You may have argued in the past without Mendy, but Kepa stepped in. Obviously, you have players like, I said, look at the team now, Mendy, Silva, Conte. Obviously, they're 3 key players and we're better with them. But their substitutes and their replacements aren't the worst. Chalobah comes in really well. Kepa comes in really well. Jorginho comes in really well. And I think he's still an important player. Don't get me wrong. And he's still a key player. But I get your point. And I understand it, especially as we've seen him without him in recent games. But what I would say is you see what we're missing from him when he's playing. Same with Kovacic, same with Silva, same with every star player on that team. But we can't afford to rest him here and then, do it without him. He's come off a bench and being quite effective. But Palace wasn't his best game, to be really honest. No. But he's still important. He's still a good player. And, I expect him to start. But I also could see Kovacic and Jorginho if they're trying to keep Conte fresh.
Yeah, no, 100%. Moving on to the front three then. One player who's definitely a shoo-in, who's been our outstanding player in recent weeks, last month or so, Hakim Ziyech is for me, a shoo-in. You've got to keep playing him. He's the only attacker that actually is doing anything at the moment. How impressed have you been with his resurgence in form? Because if you asked me maybe a month or two ago, could I see this happening? I would have said absolutely no. But he's turning out now to be, and he's looking like the player we actually signed from Ajax, and he's showing what we actually signed.
No, I'm very impressed, and I'm really happy for him because I've been critical of him recently, and I still will be, because I do believe he's a good player, but he's not consistent enough. But what we're seeing right now is that consistency and is that talent. And like I said, he's been our most consistent attacker since probably about Spurs. I'd say Spurs are home in the league where we won 2-0 and he scored that beautiful goal. And he's been brilliant recently. Good to see him playing well, getting minutes, being our key attacker. And he's the only attacker right now who you can say should be starting week in, week out. And I'm interested to see what you say for the rest of the attack, because mine's quite nailed on, but don't know how popular it would be. I'd put Werner on the left, Ziyech on the right, Havertz up top.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Werner at the moment, I don't know, like what's kind of going on with him. Is he? Oh, I know Tuchel said he had a cold or something. That must have come from the air condition or whatever it was on the flight. He wasn't in the squad for Palace. He hasn't played a lot of football recently at all, whether it's illness, whether it's COVID or whatever it is. I've almost kind of, for me personally, like he's not really in my thoughts whenever I think of a Chelsea team anymore. I know that sounds quite harsh, but because he's been so out of it for so long, you sort of kind of forget that, you know, he's part of Chelsea. I mean, I thought against Plymouth, I was there. That when he come on, he was awful. He was like, you know, not going for the ball, etc. Club World Cup in the final, he was okay. He does what he always does. He's always offside. You know, he does something good and then immediately follows it up with something awful. Like there's no consistency there. But one thing I will say is that you kind of, when he's not playing, you do kind of miss his energy around the pitch. If one thing he's good at, I know it sounds stupid because if you're as a professional football player, you should always work hard, but we don't always see that. He does always work hard. That is one thing that I'll give you. He will chase everything down. He'll run after things. But I mean, other than that, I don't see a lot from him. I mean, obviously, you probably feel slightly differently. I mean, what do you think that he could offer this side that we've kind of been missing in recent weeks?
Energy in attack, going forward, somebody who wants to play for Chelsea. And I do see the arguments against him, and he has been poor for quite a while this season, since about October. But I do feel like he should be getting a chance. You know, Hudson Odoi's out, Lukaku's not in form, Mason is injured. So I wouldn't object to him starting and giving him that opportunity. But, you know, you do have to look at the summer. What's going to happen to him? You know, will he have to move on? Probably. Let's be really honest. As much as he's loved and his name's sung every game, every minute at the Bridge, he's not been good enough this season. But I do hope he starts, and I do hope he gets the opportunity to add something to our attack and we gain that confidence, because there's still a player in there. We just need to uncover that.
Yeah, I mean, the more time that goes by, I just worry that it's just less and less likely to happen. But in terms of other options on that left-hand side, I'd just be interested to get your thoughts very briefly on Christian Pulisic, someone that, again, divides opinion amongst Chelsea fans. Clearly a talented football player. For me, moments, again, it just seems to be a moments player in terms of undoubted ability. Doesn't do it on a consistent enough basis. We can't keep referring back to Project Restart when we talk about Christian Pulisic. Like, it gets ridiculous now. And I understand that the trail of thought that, you know, yes, he's not had a run of games in his preferred position. But ultimately, when you're at a big football club, whatever minutes you're given in whatever position, you've got to take that moment and seize it to show that you should actually be playing. And I think when he has played in a handful of opportunities he's been given, he's not been good enough. And I fully respect that he's not a number 8, and him and Havertz should have swapped positions on Saturday, in my opinion. But given that, I thought on Saturday he was dreadful. Possibly, along with Lukaku, probably the worst player on the pitch. And I don't like to be critical about players, but if people are going to criticise other attackers, then you've got to bring that same energy when discussing everyone else. And for me, I'm a bit lost as to what we do with him. He would be another one that potentially I'd look at moving on this summer, because again, I don't really know where he fits and kind of what he offers at the moment, because every time he plays, I just kind of get that frustrating feeling that there is ability there, but we just hardly ever see it. I mean, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I agree, and it's frustrating to watch because we know what he's capable of. And you sound like a broken record when you talk about our attacks, but you know what he's capable of, you know how good he can be, but he's just been poor. And, you know, part of that this season was down to a bit of injury, a bit of COVID, a bit of playing out of position, but Palace was a horrible performance. And I was having this discussion with one of my mates in the away end about who you'd rather see go off, Pulisic or Ziyech. And actually I said Ziyech. On current form, obviously you'd say Pulisic, but I feel like a long-term investment. Pulisic's still young. He's still got that time to develop and become a good player and turn up good. Whereas Ziyech is getting towards that end of his career. If he doesn't maintain his consistency, you worry. So, you know, you wouldn't be objected to seeing him go in the summer. And it's a frustrating sign. And so right now he's not in my starting team. And he hasn't been in my starting team, I don't think, ever this season, really. I think he's one of a few attackers. I think every other attacker I've had in my lineup for a certain game or strongest 11, bar Pulisic, and I think that says a lot about not only my opinion about him, but what he offers and what he's like for us.
Yeah, I mean, I also get the argument being made. You know, if he scores most times he plays in his preferred position. I get that he's not playing in his preferred position, but as I mentioned before, You know, when you're given minutes on a pitch at Chelsea to impress, even if it's not in your preferred position, you've still got to show a bit of something. And we aren't seeing that. And again, Ziyech is the prime reason we play players in position. Yeah, I would agree with that. But having said that, Ziyech, again, this change in system to the back four has benefited him massively. Yes, he's been a bit more influential since his form picked up in the back three, but a back three definitely makes Ziyech less impactful than a back four does. But I get both points. Personally, as an overall package, I agree with you, mate. He's probably one that will be moved on in the summer. But I also subscribe to the thought that we haven't seen this guy get a consistent run in his preferred position. I also get that. So it's a difficult one to weigh up. But ultimately, if I'm in the Chelsea board, he's probably one that if we got offered £40 million for him, I'd be moving him on. But and that's kind of just the harsh reality. But I'll tell you what, mate, let's go with it. Let's put Timo Werner in there. I mean, to be honest, for me, this is picking what kind of me and you would go for. We know what it's going to be. It's going to be Lukaku up front, and it'd probably be Kai Havertz on that left-hand side. But I mean, you obviously want Havertz as a number 9 to play tomorrow. I think it's pretty obvious that Lukaku's going to play. I think we all know that. What do you think Havertz would give differently in that number 9 position to what we're currently seeing from Lukaku?
Some effort.
Yeah.
That's the one thing.
Yeah.
I mean, he offers a different part of his game, but I feel like Havertz fits into our system better. He offers us more of a goal scorer and a creator in that front. And I think also how he links up with the attackers. Lukaku is someone who relies on service and will complain about not getting service. Yeah. Havertz someone who will create that for himself and get into his position and make an effort. And that's what I want to see. And that's why I think he's a better starting striker.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a twofold thing, though, isn't it? Because arguably, when Kai Havertz plays or when Lukaku doesn't play, as a front line, we look more fluid. But then we're less clinical because those guys aren't as good as finishing as Lukaku is. But then the trade-off with Lukaku is we're less fluid but more clinical. So it's finding that balance. And I mean, what do you, I know we touched on it earlier. What do you think Kai Havertz's best position is?
I still think he's good as a number 9. And when we started to see him in that position last season, you could see that he was showing signs of talent and signs of strength. And the thing is, he's still young enough to be able to develop a certain position in a certain role. He's still in that formative years of his career in terms of professionally. So I think up front, he works really well. And especially if we're looking at the future of Chelsea and future front lines, we'll always be playing with some sort of central forward, whether that's a second striker, a central forward, or a striker. And I think Havertz ticks all 3 of those boxes, and he offers that versatility not only across the attack, but in the middle as a striker. And, you know, naturally we signed him more so as an attacker and someone to play out wide as one of those wingers, as one of those number 10s. But he's probably our most versatile attacker who can play it across the front 3. And that's what I think is really valuable about him. And yes, he hasn't been great every game, but he does still show us glimpses and that potential. And we do have to remember, he's still young. He's still very early on in his career. So you give him a benefit of the doubt, not to mention he's a match winner of 2 of our trophies. So he has that benefit of the doubt. But I do think he offers a lot in terms of versatility and in terms of options across the attacking trio.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. For my personal opinion, I know he's young and this is his 2nd season now. He's been here about probably, a season and a half. This will be coming up to 2 seasons. Yes, we're forever grateful for those winning goals in the cup finals, those big moments. But for me, I know it takes time to adapt to the league. For the amount of money we've spent and kind of the hype, I know you can't help the hype as a player. You know, you don't choose to hype yourself up. I feel slightly underwhelmed with what we've received so far in terms of, look, it's great that he scored the goals in the cup finals, but, you know, in a week in, week out in the Premier League, I've got to be honest, I could probably count on one hand the amount of times I thought, wow, Kai Havertz was a big difference today. Like, it just hasn't been the case. And it's not just him. It's important to remember, you know, that when criticising attackers, this is the case for the vast majority of the attack. But for the investment we've made in Kai Havertz, I'm just a bit underwhelmed. Like, this is someone that's going to be so good. You watch how he did in the Bundesliga. The guy looks unbelievable. I know it's obviously the Bundesliga to the Premier League is very different, but you don't suddenly forget how to play football. Like, I'm not saying that maybe his style of play from the Bundesliga is not as effective in the Premier League. You have to slightly adapt. But of course, there's there's that. But I just feel a little bit underwhelmed. Do you think that's fair? Or do you think that's a little bit harsh on someone that's come into a new country at a young age in a COVID time and it's going to take a little bit longer to adapt?
No, I think it's fair. And I see where the argument's coming from. And it depends, I'm just looking at his stats right now.
Yeah.
He's got 9 goals in his first season and 6 in his second season. And when you consider age, COVID, settling into a new place, that's not too bad, But it depends how much you want to look at those numbers. I think you can look at the games as well. I say he's got 7 goals this season, only 2 of them in the Premier League. That's something you have to bear in mind. That's where the money is. And I can remember those 2 goals, 2 headers against Liverpool and Burnley. Yes, good goals, but he can offer more and he can develop more. So I do think, yes, he should be offering more. Yes, he should be doing more. And I want to see more from Havertz so much because every Chelsea fan loves him already. He's earned his place in Chelsea immortality. But we want to see him really fulfill that almost like prophecy about him, that hype, that potential. And we do have to give him time. We do have to remember that. But I do wonder how much time we're thinking about Chelsea and thinking about ball. But realistically, of all the attackers, I'd say, excluding the academy boys, because Mason's always going to be top of that. Out of the purchased attackers, I still think he's got the highest level at Chelsea. And he's also got the most kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but he's the best option for the board. And he's the one least likely to be sold. Not only because he was our record signing last season, but also because he's delivered those big moments. And I don't think the board would see that as a feasible option. But look, I love him. I'm not going to hide that. And I do still think he's got time. He's got potential to grow and develop and improve. And part of it is patience, but part of it is also like, come on, Kai, show us what you can do week in, week out, rather than on these big moments. We know you can perform on a big stage and you're a superb big game player. Show us your football week in, week out. Show us why we paid you. Show us why you are the Chelsea legend already at this age, at this stage of your career.
Yeah, no, 100%, mate. No, he's definitely not one that's going to be sold this summer. He's definitely got another season. But yeah, like you say, he's got to, he does well in the cups, but the league's where it's at. We didn't sign him like to do well in cup competitions. We signed him to help us win the Premier League. And when you say 2 Premier League goals, I know he's been injured a bit this season. He's been out with COVID. He's not played in all the games, but 2 league goals by the time you're almost at the end of February, that's not, I don't care who you are. That's not good enough. And it simply isn't. But as you say, look, there's definitely room there. But what I think will really help him is if he just plays, we just decide on a position for him and just play him there. I think this constant moving him around doesn't really help him. 1 week he's a centre forward, 1 week he's a left winger, 1 week he's like a narrow 10, 1 week he might be a number 8. Like this is not helpful to someone, particularly as a young player. I know you've got to be versatile, and if the team, the manager tells you to play a certain position, you're going to step up and do it. But I don't think all this passing him around is doing him any favours. But yeah, there's certainly a player there. But I mean, yeah, mate, we might see that tomorrow night. I'd be very surprised if Romelu Lukaku didn't start. I think we know that he seems to always start. But I mean, that team's more than good enough to get a result. Just before we round out, mate, score prediction for tomorrow night. Obviously, as we touched on, there's no away goal, so we concede it's not a complete disaster. I mean, what are you expecting to see?
I'm expecting a win, and I'm expecting a comfortable win, but I'm also, I think it's unrealistic to be like 4-0, 5-0, 6-0. So I think 2-0 Chelsea is a fair reflection of a sort of game we can have, of how it can unfold and what we're looking like right now. So 2-0.
Yeah, no, that's fair, mate. I was going to go with a 3-1, but I mean that's a little bit ambitious in terms of, I can't remember the last time we actually scored more than 2 goals from open play in a match. I think it's a while ago, but we've got to start somewhere. So I'll go with a 3-1, but ultimately, as long as we take a lead to Lille, then that's the most important thing. Mate, thank you so much for your time. If people want to check your workout and stuff, obviously I've tagged your Twitter in the banner and obviously linked it all below. Where, if people want to read about more of what you've done, where's the best place for them to head?
If you've enjoyed what you've heard from me today, you can find all of my work on nishalsblog.com. Articles, videos, podcasts, they're all there. And you can follow me on Twitter at Nischal_SP to see everything I'm up to and follow for my opinion. So yeah, thank you for having me on today.
No, absolute pleasure, mate. Thanks for your time as always. Guys, make sure you smash a like on this video. Please do click the subscribe button. I appreciate all of your support, all of your help. Looking to get to 400 by the end of this month. Need to get a bit of a wriggle on. So yeah, guys, if you're tuning in live and you've not subscribed, just click that button. It really helps me out. Spread the word. And yeah, guys, we'll be back with a match day vlog from the Lille game tomorrow night. I'll be up Wednesday morning. So yeah, catch you then. Cheers.